The News at 5 on 2 Works For You starts right now.
This individual is currently being treated for malaria, and we hope them a speedy recovery.
Malaria, not Ebola. That's the preliminary word tonight from health officials. But right now, a Tulsa patient is still in quarantine as we wait to get the all clear from the CDC. Good evening. I'm 2 News anchor Russ McCaskey. We are live tonight at the OSU Medical Center in downtown Tulsa. We will have more on the patient who's being held here and his condition and what he has tested positive for and what he hasn't tested positive for. That coming up in just a minute. First, though, want to check in with Storm Shield Chief Meteorologist Brett Anthony for a weather alert. Going to be a little chilly out there for the trick-or-treaters tonight, Brett.
It really is, Russ. We're live here in Sand Springs, where the Sand Springs Sandites entertain Booker T. Washington and the Hornets, and you can see the wind, at least right now, it is blowing out of the northwest at about 10 to 20 miles an hour. As we head through the evening hours, that wind should subside. It's shown evidence so far of subsiding just a little bit. Let's talk about that weather alert. First off, we have the freeze warning tonight into tomorrow morning. A freeze is likely. We're going to find temperatures by tomorrow morning anywhere from 20 to 27 degrees across all of green country, and it really will have an impact on tender vegetation, and you need to think about disconnecting a hose that you might have attached to your house. You don't want to have any kind of freezing hose line backing up into your house and causing any kind of water issues inside the house. We take a look from the Midtown camera. A lot of bright blue sky out there. A gorgeous afternoon sky-wise, just a little chilly when it comes to the winds. We take a look at the temperatures across the region. Just a few multiple currents here that we'll look at. One, Independence, Kansas. We'll also look into Sand Springs, where the temperatures are in the 50s, and of course out in Tahlequah we're in the lower 50s with that north wind still blowing. Around the region you'll find a couple of 40s now starting to show up to the north on the Kansas side, perhaps up toward Veneta, and our winds again still gusty out there at about 20 miles an hour, but they should be settling down. So our Friday night live football forecast, we'll go with a temperature in the low 40s. By the time we kick things off and get the first quarter underway, the north winds at about 10 miles an hour, temperatures will drop into the 30s. Russ, if you don't bring gloves along, it'll be a red knuckle night, so you'll need to have those gloves and maybe a heavier coat tonight. And don't forget, you can take the latest weather updates with you when you trick or treat tonight. Our Storm Shield weather app works like a weather radio. It turns your phone or tablet into a weather radio. It's available for download for Apple and Android devices. Russ, we'll send it back to you from a very chilly Sand Springs.
All right, Brett, thanks. Tulsa dodges a bullet when it comes to Ebola. A Tulsa area man who had recently traveled to West Africa had a fever spike last night. It's a story that we first brought you. It's breaking news on 2 News at 10 last night. Well, today, 2 sets of tests show that that man does not have Ebola, but he's not out of the woods just yet. It's been a busy 24 hours for Tulsa healthcare workers. Late Thursday, a man who had been to West Africa, the epicenter for the Ebola crisis, had a fever spike.
The Tulsa Health Department has been monitoring an individual who recently returned from West Africa. Now that individual was determined by the CDC to be low risk.
But that fever was cause for alarm. The patient was taken by ambulance to the OSU Medical Center in downtown Tulsa and put in isolation. Word of a possible Ebola patient spread quickly, but this morning, a sigh of relief. 2 test results show no Ebola. A 3rd set of tests will be run this weekend.
As a precautionary measure, samples are still being sent to the CDC to be tested for Ebola, but that's really a precaution. This individual had no known exposure to the Ebola virus.
That's the good news. The bad news is that the patient tested positive for malaria. While malaria is treatable and far less insidious than Ebola, it's still serious. But as far as the public goes, the patient is not contagious.
It's important to remember that malaria is not something that's transmitted person to person, meaning that this individual is not going to give malaria to someone else. The only way to contract malaria is through the bite of an infected mosquito.
Now that patient remains in isolation at the OSU Medical Center back here behind me. He will remain in isolation until he gets the all clear from the CDC. That will likely happen this weekend, either Saturday or Sunday. Of course, we'll keep you posted on all that. He will then be monitored for his 21-day incubation period. All right, new at 5, the State Health Department announcing the creation of a high-level Ebola treatment facility here in Oklahoma. It'll be operated by the OU Medical Center and will be located in a decommissioned hospital building on the Oklahoma Health Center campus in Oklahoma. Oklahoma City. That unit will be separate from existing patient care facilities. Construction is expected to take about 3 to 4 weeks to build. All right, meanwhile, local hospitals taking extra precautions to protect staff, patients, and visitors. Hospitals like Hillcrest and St. John are using questionnaires like the one you see here for anyone being admitted. The hospitals also have posted signs asking patients to speak up if they have Ebola-like symptoms. A $500 million lawsuit against the Kimberly-Clark Corporation. It alleges that the company falsely claimed that its surgical gowns protected against Ebola and other infectious diseases. In fact, the lawsuit alleges that the company knew for at least a year that its gowns had failed industry tests, but continued to claim that the product provided the highest level of protection against diseases, including Ebola. Kimberly-Clark has a paper plant down in Jinx, but they do not make surgical gowns at that facility. Nurse Casey Hickox is free to travel without restrictions. A judge in Maine today rejected efforts by the state to try to limit her movements. The judge says that Hickox must continue daily monitoring of her health and coordinate her travel with state health officials. All right, back here in Tulsa, we can tell you we're going to take a look at 6 o'clock at the last 24 hours, the plans and the protocols, how everything has related to Ebola and this possible patient who has now tested positive for malaria. Also take a look at whether anything might change in the future. Meantime, a man convicted of 3 murders is headed to prison. Today, a judge denied Kevin Sweat's chance for a new hearing. Sweat will spend his entire life in prison. In July, he entered a blind plea, saying that he's guilty for killing his fiancée and 2 young girls. Then last week, Sweat asked to withdraw that plea. He claims he only entered it to talk to the FBI. The victim's family has mixed feelings on Sweat avoiding the death penalty.
Yes and no, because I think there's a lot to be said about having to spend the rest of your life in jail and having to watch your back the rest of your life.
Well, Sweat won't go to prison before November 10th. He filed some paperwork to delay it, but Sweat faces more charges for cutting his attorney's neck with a razor. All right, 2 News anchor Karen Larson has a traffic alert for us. There were a lot of problems earlier this afternoon. Let's check in with her now to see how the roads look. Karen?
It's still not looking really great. Taking a look around town right now, we want to show you that some of the areas, all of these triangles, of course, representing traffic accidents. But look at all the stop and go along Highway 75 in Glenpool, all at 169 right here where it comes into Memorial Drive. And, of course, out by Catoosa at the casino, definitely stop and go traffic. And at 169 into the Owasso area, you're definitely going to see a slow and go there as well. For a complete look at your morning commute, check out 2 News Today each weekday morning starting at 5. Russ?
All right, Karen, you know, from dash cam video to domestic violence, a lot of new laws go on the books starting tomorrow. 2 News investigator Marla Carter takes a look at how they could affect you.
In all, there are 60 new state laws that go into effect tomorrow. The 2 News investigators examined all of them. Here's a look at a few. One deals with how domestic violence is reported. Oklahoma ranks 3rd in the country for domestic violence, according to a report released by the Violence Policy Center. Starting Saturday, law enforcement that respond to domestic violence situations must ask a series of questions to determine the victim's physical danger. They must then determine if the victim needs any services after that. Also tomorrow, new laws regarding the release of dash cam video take effect. The Highway Patrol will be required to provide dash cam video in most cases under the Open Records Act. They don't have to release any video if there's a minor involved or a deceased person is shown in the video. OHP has only released a few videos over the years. One was in Okfuskee County, and it was a fight between Trooper Daniel Martin and an EMT. It gained national attention. The video was released after public pressure. Martin received 5 days unpaid suspension for that. Also, there are several human trafficking laws that go into effect, including one that requires anyone who knows about human trafficking to report it to the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics. The OBN must then go on to report it to the local DA. There's also new laws affecting sex offenders that go into effect. We'll tell you more about that coming up tonight at 6. Plus, you can see a complete list on KJRH.com. Marla Carter, 2 News works for you.
All right, Marla, thanks. Happening now, an investigation after a deadly disaster over California's Mojave Desert. Virgin Galactic isn't offering any details as to what caused the space tourism rocket known as Spaceship Two to explode after takeoff on a test flight. One crew member was killed and another was seriously hurt. The debris is scattered all over the desert. Well, some new information about a rocket that exploded Tuesday off the coast of Virginia. Orbital Sciences Corporation says that they triggered the rocket's onboard flight termination system just as soon as they realized there was a problem. The unmanned rocket was supposed to take supplies to the International Space Station. No one was hurt in that incident. Continuing coverage now of the deadly plane crash in Kansas. You may recall I covered that story live yesterday from the Wichita airport. 4 people died when a small plane crashed into a building just after takeoff. 2 of them were inside the building, which is a flight training center. Crews are now working to recover their remains.
We don't like leaving folks who have died in a structure or any other place overnight especially, and the fact of the matter is that we don't want to get anybody else hurt.
Just before the crash, the pilot told the control tower that an engine had gone out. Federal investigators are expected to provide a preliminary report on the investigation within the week. The complete investigation isn't expected for at least 6 to 9 months. It's been a growing problem for months. Overgrown grass in an East Tulsa neighborhood. New at 5, how problem solver Jamil Donath got results.
And it's going to be a cold night across Green Country, a freeze warning in effect. And we're also tracking a storm for Election Day. I've got the details in your certified most accurate forecast coming up.